Well, welcome to the multi-cloud management panel. I'm your host, David Senf, cybersecurity strategist at Bell, and I'm really just thrilled to have the opportunity to explore key multi-cloud trend lines with really just such an esteemed group. And thank you to Cyber Tech and Risk for bringing us all together for this panel. So with that, let's meet our panel. So first, we've got Poonam Mishra, and she is a cloud endpoint security specialist at Microsoft with over a dozen years of experience working on infrastructure and on security domains. And Poonam, Microsoft is what now like the world's largest security company. So anyway, thanks so much for joining our panel today. We've got Vinh Tran. He is the head of cloud engineering at RBC with hands-on technology leadership and really just a deep understanding of infrastructure and development practices. And he's led hundreds of different projects. And, RBC has been a leader in Canada when we talk about, cloud native practices, move into DevOps, move into, bringing on SREs and that kind of thing. Really one of the pioneers in Canada. So Vinh, welcome to you as well.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, we've got Pradheepan, Manohara, and he is a senior manager of the Azure practice lead at Accenture, and he's got just a span of real great expertise, security in the cloud, IAM, application security, crypto, and risk management. We're going to be leaning on you a lot, Pradeep, and Accenture really just has an expansive bench of security talent and security offerings. So just again, Pradeep, thanks so much for making the time for us.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Dave.
Yeah, and we've got George Karamanoglou, and he is the business solution architect at Zscaler. George has over 25 years of experience. That's a quarter century, George, of experience in tech, and works with global customers to develop and help them transform, and just really some great stuff that he's doing over at Zscaler. And George, Zscaler had was the sole occupants of the coveted upper right-hand quadrant in Gartner's Web Security Gateway, kind of the core of the SASE solutions. So again, thank you so much for joining our panel as well, George.
David, thank you. It's a pleasure, and thanks for pointing that out.
Anytime.
Look for Zscaler.
Yeah. So okay. So let's begin. Let's get into our questions. We've got a lot and very little time to go through this. So what I want to first do is level set on multi-cloud itself. Like, where are we at today? Where do we think it's evolving? And kind of what are the core workloads that we see moving? And Vinh, I think you'd just be fantastic at starting us off with this from your perspective. When you think of multi-cloud, what are you thinking and where are we heading?
So I think, I think a lot of organizations are using a lot of clouds and more clouds than they probably know about, whether it's Office 365 or you've got iCloud storage, Salesforce. All these really technically count as cloud SaaS solutions. But generally, when we're speaking about multi-cloud, I think we're referring more to the infrastructure as a service, the platform as a service, the really, the large public cloud providers, the Google Cloud platforms, the Microsoft Azures, the AWS web services. Those are really the clouds that we've really, that have really helped us reduce our need on traditional hosting infrastructure, and I think when we allude to multi-cloud, we're kind of referring to those services.
Yeah, because sometimes people think of multiple clouds as multi-cloud, but it's really multi-cloud is its own thing where I'm distributing the workloads across it. And where are we at today? Like when you think of the financial services patch, say as an example, instead of pointing right at RBC, when you think about the financial patch, do you see it's really kind of early days, and then what kind of workloads do you see going into that environment?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we RBC are pretty far down that multi-cloud journey. We've got AWS, we've got Azure, and I think we feel that it's been a pretty big success for us, and we see that really becoming key to our cloud strategy. It's a big part of it for us is our product management approach. RBC at least has really bought into this product mindset where we built our major products to span multiple clouds, right? And we've used technologies like Kubernetes and we've used Terraform that are really inherently multi-cloud friendly. And these are really technologies that over the last couple of years that have really blossomed. But using these technologies has allowed us to really set ourselves up for success and become extensible in the future if we were to add, let's say, a third public cloud. We'd really just be extending the existing product and its capabilities to another cloud. For one of our products, that means, adding clusters in the new cloud. For another product, it means, configuring a new Terraform resource provider. But by taking that product-centric approach, we can really set ourselves up, to scale to additional clouds in the future. And and I think that's the big thing there, and the key principle there for us is that the cloud or the platform, AWS or Azure, is not the product for us. The product is that service, that Kubernetes service, that Terraform pipeline. As long as we're building those to be the products, to be multi-cloud, it really gives us a lot of options, gives us a lot of opportunities to really be portable, yet offer a good balance of capabilities as well. I'd love to hear what the others think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, Vinh, what we noticed is that a good cloud strategy right from the get-go and right from the architecture stage, right? So the establishing that as part of the guiding principles and moving forward from there is where it all stays and sticks together, right? And also a good collaboration between the product teams as well as the platform teams, and bringing in that engagement model, which enables the platform teams to work seamlessly with the cloud team is one of, or with the product teams is one of those aspects which really is key to enable a successful multi-cloud strategy, right, within the organization, right? Just putting it out there, I know I say this because I've been working with Vinh for quite some time, and I kind of understand what his thought process is. So yeah, it's always been a struggle right from the get-go, but I think once you get the foundations right, it's pretty much it's not frictionless, but it's going to be much better. Right? So,
yeah, very interesting. Great addition to that as well. And I'm thinking, Poonam, from your perspective, you deal with a lot of different customers, and as we start to, organizations go deeper into multi-cloud and they distribute their workloads across the environment, a couple of things kind of come to mind, like how do we keep up with the inventory of those assets at the same time, and what constraints do you tend to think about? Because there's great benefits that we can get for sure as we go deeper into multi-cloud, but what's the things that you think about in terms of those constraints that you might guide organizations towards?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, David. I will start saying that, yeah, I agree that adopting multi-cloud environments help efficiently distribute your computing resources and also reduce risk of service interruption. Something that we have seen in last year in the pandemic is with security and standardization of work from home tools, how organizations that have adopted a cloud environment workforce or multi-cloud, how easier it was to adopt a remote work lifestyle, which made it really, really easy. It could have been really hard for organizations working on premises. So I wanted to add that how multi-cloud environments make it easier for organization to achieve what they're looking in terms of digital transformation. But along with that, what we always see is multi-cloud environments make it easier than ever to lose track of which applications are running where, and even maintaining the assets, like where and how much this costs you day by day. That's on top of that. And something that's concerning is it becomes really hard to manage the security of those untracked assets. And I've seen that, and from the company side, we have also seen that happening with a lot of our customers who are on the multi-cloud environment. And in such cases, we normally suggest that enable some kind of central logging in each cloud, like centralized events from all clouds in either a cloud-based SIEM or other monitoring platform that the organization has that gives you insight of what assets are running where. The other thing we recommend is considering a cloud security posture management service, which can help you dictate the desired state or configuration for the cloud infrastructure before monitoring the actual state of what is in place. And something very, very important is what we recommend, and I personally have working on different client environments, and I've seen companies normally ignoring is maintain inventory of all your cloud assets. and consider all of the applicable possibilities under a risk management plan. So it's really important that organizations understand that, maintain an inventory, and this should all be falling into a risk management program of the organization. Another thing that we normally recommend is centralize your vulnerability scanning services and endpoint security products, and properly evaluate assets in multi-cloud environment because our IT assets are just as important when they become your cloud assets. So these are some of the recommendations that we normally give to clients, or we observe that our customers are on multi-cloud environment, because each cloud provider has their own set of policies and guidelines that we should all follow.
Those are all fantastic, and I know that our audience will want to double click on those. And I know that everyone on this panel, I know Pradeep would be happy to double click on all of those different areas you've talked about, and yourself as well. And so I think I'd encourage our audience to follow up with you on those different areas afterwards as well. And I want to transition. So you're talking about different controls, and George, from your perspective, when we look at, so Poonam was talking about some of the different controls that we're looking at in cloud. And oftentimes when people talk about those controls and they talk about multi-cloud, we'll talk about identity management, we'll talk about API security. The network, we don't often talk much about that in that environment, but it seems like a lot of interesting telemetry would be crossing the wire still. Just kind of curious from your perspective, where you think we're heading in that regard, and what are the controls you're thinking about as we go into a multi-cloud environment?
Yeah, thank you, David. Great points made here, and I think what we're hearing is there's a lot of variety in the cloud, and there's a lot of good reasons why folks would place bets and initiatives in many different types of clouds, right? And the traditional data center as well, possibly going towards a private cloud model, a highly virtualized model. But the rationale here is, how much do you need to own? If you're a highly regulated financial services environment, you may need to own the applications, may resist moving some of those applications into the cloud. If you go with a SaaS service, you want to consume as quickly as possible. If you're looking at PaaS, you want to build fast. And if you're an infrastructure as a service model, you essentially want to not have to manage as much of the elements, but fundamentally still owning a traditional network model or a traditional infrastructure model. So the key thing here is, the implication is, if I'm going to secure all this through a common identity and application destination aware model, maybe the network is not as important as it used to be in the data center. But actually, it's actually more important. But the capabilities that exist in the network transport actually need to be significantly more intelligent, more application aware. And so this movement away from controls which are perimeter based, port, not as aware of what the applications are actually doing within a particular protocol. That's where things are changing. And the network now is not just the network, the private network that you own, but also the internet as a common network transport. So if anything, the network is more important. There's more dynamicism, let's say, or more of a spread in the network and what's being connected, and the services that need to be there are much more important, much more aware of who is the end user, what is the application, what is the path, but not necessarily oriented around the perimeter or the boundary.
Very interesting. And when you think about, in the cloud, and I've got workloads running, and I want to be able to reduce the blast radius of an attack. When we think about micro-segmentation, certainly there's more possibilities now than ever to be able to do that in sort of an automated fashion. I'm curious if that area of the network as well for you. I mean, obviously you guys absorbed Edgewise, and there's other solutions in that space, but just maybe your quick thoughts on micro-segmentation in the cloud native environment.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Poonam. I think the starting point was there relative to some new capabilities that Zscaler has introduced, specifically around the segmentation, workload segmentation space. And there, the shift is definitely to move away from a dependency on segmenting based on network perimeter, lots of small networks with lots of perimeter-based firewalls, and really use kind of a segmentation model that is not boundary limited. So really where the workload itself is essentially gauging what segment it belongs to, the identity controls, and the security cloud in between are determining segmentation and not necessarily depending on the network, allowing the network to do what it needs to do, but the segmentation essentially being its own independent layer above that.
Got it. And sorry, Poonam, you're going to make some points on that as well.
I'm sorry, cloud network has always been a very fascinating topic for me, and I love this topic. So normally,
Go ahead. Yeah.
upon it, I think of it in this way: it hasn't been long since all users, devices, and applications we all corralled into this closed network with defined entry and exit points, and essentially those entry exit points were all circled with a firewall to protect the perimeter. But today, however, if we look at the boundaries, they're blurred between work and home network, corporate and personal devices. We have physical virtual architecture, and of course, we have on-premises and cloud infrastructure. And when I think more about this, it's with this rapid change in how we are dealing with things now, it makes sense to invest in more in identity, API security, and secure cloud segments as well, just like George mentioned. And I think more than that, we should also focus defining baselines. A very important topic that I normally point to bring up is a properly defined baseline that can help address a number of challenges in the cloud network security, including ease of deployment, speed of change, and even shared responsibility. So,
if I can add just a little bit to
that.
I think the essential here is that while the network continues to be highly important, it's limited in the amount of information that it's available to you in order to properly understand what's going on, who's consuming what, and what is that application. And for that, you really need a richer set of data. And so this is where the identity controls, workload segmentation, API integration to the various cloud providers to understand who's using what the virtual clouds, how they're organized, and what the assets are in there. And also when everything is communicating over TLS, HTTP, for example, and you have file services, database services, any number of applications being transported over a common protocol, you really need to dig into the messages, the payloads themselves, and be much more aware of what's going on, what those conditions are, to secure them, to segment them, and to provide the best experience, the best path. It's a combination of all of the above. The layers are collapsing somewhat.
Yeah, looks like we're kind of drifting towards a zero trust architecture framework conversation.
Exactly. Maybe Pradeep, I'll keep with you for a second, because Poonam started to talk a little bit earlier on about CSPM and about trying to start to manage consistency across a cloud-based environment. And we think about I've got these multiple environments, and it seems there'd be constant drift in terms of configuration and versions, entitlements, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm curious from your perspective, kind of building on what Poonam was saying earlier, how you direct organizations to think about that consistency, and maybe we'll follow up with Vinh after that as well from an RPC perspective.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thanks, Dave. Right. So every time we talk to clients, or when we have a conversation with clients, the concern they have is, hey, Pradeep, it's great. We speak about cloud enablement and we talk about the capabilities which cloud brings to the table, but I have no idea what's actually happening in that cloud, right? Then I look at them like, hey, there are cloud native capabilities which allows you to track, monitor, govern all of those aspects. Why are you not enabling them? They're like, oh, it has the baseline configuration enabled, but that's about it. I have no visibility towards it, right? Now, this brings back to a very important question, right? So what are you doing right from the get-go? We take them back to the drawing board to check, okay, let's sit down and talk about how did you implement it? What was done? And what are the policies which you look at? What's your compliance oversight on top of all of these things? And what tool sets are you actually using to actually govern that? Because you can't sit down and keep looking at each and every single one of them, right? And the answers we get are like, oh, we're talking to like Prismas of the world. We're talking to like Microsoft about it. We're talking to AWS about this at this point, right? So it's all about building the right strategy on what visibility you would need, and how would you take that and integrate it into your SIM, your threat management framework, and how would you look into remediating all of those aspects, right? So my recommendation is, hey, go buy a CSPM, no questions asked. It's going to help you and it's going to do things. But then how is it looking? How are you looking at things from a threat management perspective within the organization? And how is your governance layer, which sits on top of it, is being evaluated, right? And once you post a question over like, oh no, I think it's a different section over there, we need to go talk to somebody else, there is no collaboration there. There's always a silo, and people don't work together on these aspects, right? So bringing together, getting that strategy right is the first step which needs to actually happen, and then you follow it up with like identifying the right tool sets. And then once you have the tool set, establish the governance on top of it, and make sure there's integrations with your key security aspects or tool sets, which like SIM and threat identification and threat portfolios, threat portfolio management tool sets. And then, like, now we have a single pane of glass, which me and Vinh have been looking for quite some time, which gives you a holistic view, which tells you like what's actually happening within your cloud, what needs to happen, what has been remediated, and what needs to be looked at, right? And this also helps
how
you
do you
prepare,
spell pain? Is
better
it
prepare,
P
right?
A? Sorry, I was going to just ingest say, how do you spell pain? Is it ANE or AIN? Anyway, yeah, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no, this also helps to like, better prepare for like, zero-day threats and any other issues which pops up. And you have a better strategy on how to handle these issues at this time, right? I think Vinh would be a good candidate to follow on because he has
I think so too. Yeah.
we've
No,
been
so
a lot of those calls, right?
we have been through a lot of this together, Pradeep. But I think, I want to echo what Pradeep is saying is that, I think a lot of times we jump to the tool. So we say, okay, well, how are we going to manage our policies? How are we going to do this? Okay, let's go buy a tool. But, we're seeing so many of these capabilities are now natively available in the different clouds. And are we ever going to get to that single pane of glass? I see a lot of solutions, and I see a lot of tools and the capabilities. But I think you've got to work out your processes. You've got to say, okay, this is how we want to govern these alerts. These are the type of alerts we want. These are the type of policies we want to trigger. This is when we want to be notified. I think all of that stuff, if you work out that process and that machinery, then when you can interchange those tools later to say, okay, that tool is going to trigger that alert, and it's going to trigger the process. It's got to be more about the process and that governance than it should actually be about, the tool that you use to trigger it or to alert. That's really, and I think there's, once you get that process down pat, you choose your tools, and then all of this stuff starts coming together across multiple clouds.
Yeah, and on top of this, there's also another paradigm of applications which gets all the workloads which you run, like, looking at it, managing it, monitoring it, and making sure they are consistent, right? And it's been like looking at various clients from my experience, it's been an absolute, I'll be blunt and honest here, it's been an absolute nightmare. So we always try to like, hey, hold on, let's not try to make it more complex. Let's go try to simplify things, and let's look at how we want to manage it, and let's establish that portfolio, right? And that's key. And they're building that synergy between different groups to actually come together to enable that is super important, right?
Absolutely.
So very true. I mean, we all tend to, coming back to the point of, we tend to jump in and dive in and say, okay, I got a problem. What tool will I use to fix it? And then we'll build something around it in terms of our process and our training and that sort of thing, which is often so inverted. Completely agree with what you're saying in terms of, we need to understand strategically where we're going. And I think, Poonam, you were also talking about this, and George, you kind of alluded to this as well. So I think we're all in agreement that we need to, really be able to take that holistic view so that we can have the technology maybe as a layer, but everything else that we're doing really needs to have guided where that, which tools we actually wind up acquiring and that kind of thing. And so on one side, we've got the tools, on the other side, we've got the skills. So why don't we start to kind of wrap up there in terms of the skills that people will need moving forward? I know we've covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time, and there's so many areas we could all just double click on. And so if we think about the skills that we'll need, and maybe the complements, you think of the mix of those who would be on a team, and what that might look like. And some of those who are in the audience today might be from smaller organizations, so they are the team. And so for them, it would be where they are going to go and learn. But from all this, as you use your crystal ball and you look forward, you're to advise someone and say, okay, here are the things I think you need to know. moving forward. And here are the things that I think you should have on your team moving forward. We've talked a little bit about that shift away from traditional network security and thinking about it a little bit differently. So there's areas like that, but some of the other areas in cloud. And so maybe George, I'll start off with you with this one. How would you advise someone in terms of, where should you go learn, and what should you start to think about that complement of members of your team moving forward?
Yeah, I think being in a technology space, you can't get away from having good technology foundations, especially for security. So you do need some background in networking or applicationing, or somewhere in between. So that's kind of table stakes, right? I think for the future, and given the highly dynamic environment, where folks really need to focus is on being able to map those skills, as we were taught to do when we first set out on kind of this trajectory, is to think about the business, to think about the platforms and why they're there in the first place. Why does the business need to use platform as a service or SaaS or migrate their applications, and how can you help them accomplish that? So, taking an intimate understanding of what the business does, how that relates to security, how you can then apply governance, and really how you can accommodate the agility that the customer needs without sacrificing that, and getting multiple projects moving along means that skills like project management, communications, customer-centric skills like what they call soft skills are going to be even more important than they used to be for the technology specialist, the security specialist.
I definitely see that Pradeep is agreeing with you there. So what are you thinking, Pradeep?
Big time. So I'll be honest, right? So the market is pretty much saturated. Like funny story, because I know we are short on time. Just quickly, my boss calls me up every time. I don't know if you guys know Yas. Yas calls me up every time. He tells me, Pradeep, how's the hiring going? Right? So it's always a cat and mouse race. It's always a challenge, right? So recently we kind of changed our strategy when it comes to hiring. What we did was we said, look, you understand basic security, that's good. You understand a little bit of development, you understand a little bit of cloud platform, that's good. We'll bring you in and we will train you. We will invest in you. So we will help you grow along with the organizations. And that's the best approach, right? And what we do is we take, I'm kind of giving away our skill strategy, but then that's okay. What we do is we kind of get the senior folks to work alongside with these folks to actually build and develop. And once they reach a certain stage, we get them to take on their own ship and build their own boat and then sail away from there, right? And I think that's the best way at this point in time. And what I'm also noticing is there's a lot of young graduates who are walking out of universities with some good background from some pretty good universities, and we are targeting those individuals who come out of those universities to to help and manage. And once again, it's always the attitude which we look for. It's not like, hey, do you know A, B, and C? Yes, you can learn that, but then the attitude to adapt to it and work alongside
soft skills as well.
Exactly. It's very important, right?
I completely agree. And Vin, from your perspective, what are you thinking? What are you guys hiring for?
So I'm a little biased. So I think everything is an engineer to me. Everything, it's an engineer's world. It's an engineer. Everything is engineering. I think that I look at our product folks. I look at our security folks. I look at everybody in our organization working in a cloud program has a sound level of technical acumen, even just around infrastructure as code, GitOps, security principles. I think from my perspective, we don't look for people with specific languages. I don't really care about languages. Languages change so often now. It's that technical understanding, and it's not just at the engineering level. It's at the security, product management, everything. Just that deep technical understanding.
Great advice. Systems thinking. Let's move towards engineering. And Poonam, the last word goes to you on this panel. How are you directing folk in this multi-cloud world?
And I think the team kind of covered everything. And I really like what Pradeep mentioned. I really like your strategy as well, Pradeep. Thanks for sharing that, because I follow that. And I can just end up saying that my strategy is be flexible, be adaptable, and keep learning. Don't end up learning just one particular technology, or if you're interested in a cloud architecture, not just one, because security is not limited to a particular technology or field, or even it's not limited to bigger companies, like even the same advice for a smaller firm, because the cyber threat landscape is changing. I mean, so is the technology and challenges, and these are not limited to bigger firms. So invest some time in learning those challenges. Invest some times like learning DevSecOps, which is emerging industry trend among enterprises that need rapid development. And you don't have to be an expert in those. You just have, it's good that you understand how the process works, because just knowing that, it helps you understand the current issues and also solve those challenges for your organization. So I would end up with that.
So very well said. And so George Karamanoglou, thank you. Pradeep Manohara, thank you so much. Vinh, Tran, and Poonam Mishra, thank you all so much for this engaging and great panel. I'm David Senf. Have a great day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.